Hello silver friends, this is Jolie from QuickSilverHair. A couple of months ago, I asked you if you could pick my brain, what would you want to know? I collected a long list of questions that you all sent me back, and in this video, I'm going to cover 5 of those questions that were kind of repeated or overlapping and had relatively short answers. So let's get started with the first question. I ditched the dye and now my scalp is oily or dry. Why is that? So when you ditch the dye, you are essentially cutting off a chemical processing that you were doing on a routine basis. And the scalp has been trying to adjust to that chemical onslaught every single time you dyed your hair. Many people wanted to ditch the dye because of scalp irritation and hair loss. This is due to that chemical exposure. And the oily scalp or the dry scalp after you've ditched the dye is the scalp rebalancing itself. Another reason for this could be related to menopause. If you're in that phase of life, we reduce the production of sebum as we age, and this can cause a drier scalp. But as that imbalance starts to try to right itself, you can go one direction or the other. It should get better over time. And if you have to adjust, I would suggest using a shampoo that is gentle enough to use on your scalp and use a scalp massaging brush. 𝐿𝐴 has a good little brush, and their shampoo is really good for your scalp because it's non-comedogenic and non-irritating. Second question had to do with thinning of the hair. I ditched the dye and now my hair feels thinner. Why is that? So this is twofold. One, it goes back to the scalp is correcting itself, it is righting itself, and maybe you were still in a phase of losing hair from the use of dye, so it may take a little while for you to start producing hair again. A lot of times people notice that after about 3 months without dye, they notice little short pieces of hair all over their head and they think it's broken hair, and it's actually new growth. Another side of this is that you are disrupting the cuticle when you dye your hair. So the cuticle will fluff up a little bit, and depending on what kind of dye you were using, the dye actually adds pigment and weight to the hair strand, so that can actually contribute to the hair feeling a little bit thicker. If you are bothered by this and it feels really weird to you, a dry shampoo might help because it might help give you some texture and some lift at the root. The dry shampoo can also help those of you with a little bit oilier scalp. Question number 3. After being completely transitioned for 5 years, I've noticed that my natural brown hair is starting to grow back in. Am I losing my gray hair? Okay, so this is kind of an interesting one because the reality is we think, oh, once we've produced a white hair and that follicle is not producing pigment anymore, then it's a one and done type situation. There are a couple of conditions where, yes, that is true. Like people who are born with a white streak, that hair will never produce pigment again. There is another condition, Stacey London has it, where she had an illness as a child and there was a patch of hair that grew back in white and it has remained white her entire life. That is also something where this doesn't pertain. But for the most part, graying process is not all or nothing. It can, over time, change back to your natural color. I've even noticed when I've got new hair growing back in after, like, say, a period of hair loss, that I'll have like these cinnamon colored strands mixed in with my white hair. The reason for this is several layers. So there's several reasons for going gray in the first place. One is stress. So if the stressor that is causing you to lose pigment in the follicle is eliminated and you stop having that stress, it's very possible that the follicle will start creating pigment again. Illness is another one. If you are having a health concern, a health condition, or you went through a severe illness and it caused this lack of pigment to be produced in the follicle, and all of a sudden you are now well and healthy again and your nutrition and everything is balanced back out, you can start producing pigment again. If, for instance, you had a traumatic experience where it was very stressful, it caused illness, and it was kind of a twofold situation, and you resolve that issue, you heal, you get better, you move on. You can also experience that same thing where the pigment starts to grow back. There is this belief that you can have like this traumatic experience like the Bride of Frankenstein who goes white with a shock in the middle of the night. There is very little evidence that that's actually possible, and it would make sense because the pigment that is in the hair as it grows out it's already there, it's already present, and you can't go back in and take it out. So what you see when you're going through the graying process is the hair is coming in with no pigment, or it starts creating pigment again. You can actually have hair strands where it will be dark on the ends and white at the top, or vice versa, where if you started producing pigment again and maybe it's a long piece of hair, like say on my head, and it was white down here, and then all of a sudden I started producing pigment again in that section, it can be dark at this part. And I actually found one of these hairs, so I do know for a fact that it is possible. I hope that answers that question. It is a lot more complicated than that because there is the science of the follicle and how that pigment comes and goes and what it's doing depending on your health, your nutrition, and your stress levels. Question number 4. Can perfumes, hair perfumes, and essential oils stain silver hair? Yes, absolutely. And when I was working with my chemist, I talked to her about this at length because we were talking about having a fragrance-free formula just to eliminate the possibility of something being in the formula that would cause staining. Essential oils in particular have concentrated colors, so if you're going to use essential oils on your hair, make sure you dilute them with a carrier. The more diluted that color is, the less likely it will stain your hair. But if you think about it, if you look at the perfumes on your shelf or when you're shopping for perfumes, if they have a concentrated color, that color can stain your hair. So yes, absolutely, hair perfumes, essential oils can stain your hair. And the perfumes that are in hair care products are no exception. Make sure that whatever hair care products you are putting on your hair are clear, colorless, white, or maybe an off-white color. But if they start having a concentrated color like red or pink or distinct yellow or green, walk away. You don't want to put that on your gray hair and have your hair turn that color. So the last question is, do I need to change my hair care routine if I ditch the dye? Yes. Chances are good that you will experience one of the issues like your scalp changing and being oilier or drier, or your hair thinning or feeling finer. You may feel that your hair gets greasier or heavier or more weighed down a lot quicker. Part of this is due to that if you were coloring your hair, you probably were using color safe products. And color safe products have ingredients built into them to protect the hair color that you've gotten at the salon or from your box color. You don't need that anymore, but you do need to focus on making sure that your products are moisturizing enough and are clean, clear, white, or maybe slightly off-white so that you don't stain your hair. One thing I often tell people when they've ditched the dye is to make sure that when you start selecting products, you start a foundation in which you never damage that silver hair if at all possible. So what you want to look for are making sure that you have products that are moisturizing because dry hair will yellow faster than healthy hair. You want to make sure you're using products that are very conditioning and don't weigh your hair down, but actually do provide conditioning so you don't get that dry, crispy feeling. You want to make sure that you're using something that is heat protective and UV protective to protect your hair from permanent yellowing. And you want to make sure that your tools are up to date. All your heat tools should be temperature regulating, and you never want to use any kind of iron that gets over 365 degrees. If it does get over 365 degrees, just don't go there. Make sure that you stay underneath that temperature. If you can, buy something that actually shows you the temperature. If it doesn't show you the temperature, you can buy a really inexpensive infrared heat thermometer from Amazon. They're really easy to get a hold of. They're about $19, and you can check the temperature yourself. So I say build that foundation now so you don't have a problem later, because like I said, UV and heat damage are permanent, and once they happen, you have to grow that hair off just like you're growing off the dye. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope I answered one of your questions, and I hope I answered it well enough to help you have the healthiest silver hair possible. If you have further questions, you can leave those in the comments section below. There are multiple resources and product recommendations in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so now because I would love to see you next time. And until then, shine on.